during every single day of the Trump administration, I will very simply put America first.
No empire is permanent. The Dutch, the British, and even the once mighty Roman Empire eventually crumbled into the dust of history. Now, another name might be added to that list. For nearly 100 years, the American empire has maintained sole hegemony on the world stage. With only 4% of the global population, they account for 20% of the world's income. This single nation alone spends nearly 40% of the entire global military budget. However, this situation is changing rapidly. It was once predicted that China would overtake the United States as the world's largest economy by 2018. For the past few decades, China has been slowly planning to position itself at the center of a new world order. They are simply waiting for the right moment. Since 2010, China has invested over $1 trillion in developing countries worldwide, building strategic allies for the future. On the other hand, the US-led world order is now more fragile than ever. The country's national debt is spiraling. Currently, interest payments on that debt alone consume 1/6 of the annual budget. Over the last few decades, the tide of globalization seems to be reversing. The global system that America built over generations is slowly eroding. Between tariff wars and erratic government decisions, America is navigating a period of profound instability. This isn't just about one leader, it is about the moment an empire begins to believe in its own immortality, even as its foundations crumble from within. The question isn't just about Trump. The question is, stands America at a point of no return? Will the American-led world survive, or are we already witnessing the dawn of a new global superpower? Let's explore the depths of this shift. Just a few decades ago, if anyone suggested the American empire might soon collapse, they would have been laughed at. In the 1990s, the United States was busy celebrating the fall of the Soviet Union. While the dollar's influence existed before, it then became the world's sole dominant currency. By 1995, 71% of global currency reserves were in US dollars. The United States had officially become the backbone of the global financial system. More importantly, capitalism and democracy, the pillars of American society, were spreading rapidly across the globe. Even longtime rivals like Russia, Poland, and Vietnam began to shift their stances. The American empire was then at the height of its power. But while the U.S. was basking in post-World War II glory, a relatively poor country across the Pacific was quietly building the foundation for its future. In the 1990s, China's strategic planning fundamentally transformed its economy, which in turn altered the structure of the entire global system. China's economy grew at a rate of 9% annually, lifting hundreds of millions out of poverty. Yet, policymakers in Washington were not concerned. When China joined the World Trade Organization, WTO, in 2000, then U.S. President Bill Clinton viewed it as a turning point for China's future. In Clinton's words, by joining the WTO, China is not only agreeing to buy our products, they are agreeing to accept one of democracy's most cherished values, economic freedom. Although China remained a one-party authoritarian state, many in the U.S. believed that as China became more developed, it would naturally move toward democracy. To Americans, China was proof of capitalism's victory. Between 1995 and 2010, Chinese exports to the U.S. jumped from $100 billion to over $1.5 trillion. But Washington leaders failed to realize a deep truth. Just as constant dripping wears away a stone, China was patiently shifting its position on the world stage. Typically, certain changes occur during a nation's economic development. Initially, production is centered on agricultural products. Over time, people move from villages to cities, and a large portion of the workforce shifts to the industrial and manufacturing sectors. This is exactly what happened in China. Between 1990 and 2020, the size of China's manufacturing sector grew from $100 billion to nearly $5 trillion, a more than 50-fold increase. China officially became the factory of the world. American consumers became the primary buyers of those goods. Today, 97% of laptops and 78% of smartphones bought in the US are made in China. While America appeared independent on the outside, it became heavily reliant on China. Initially, this didn't seem like a bad deal because American citizens could buy goods at low prices. However, they were unknowingly walking into a financial trap. In the early 2000s, American consumer debt was $1.8 trillion. By 2020, it had surged to over $5 trillion. Today, more Americans than ever are living paycheck to paycheck, surviving on debt. Even the US government is entirely dependent on borrowing. In 2024, US national debt reached approximately $36 trillion. It is estimated to hit $54 trillion by 2034. Due to long-term unnecessary spending, the country now stands at the threshold of a terrifying financial crisis. This is not just an economic problem, it is a classic symptom of a declining empire. History shows that the pattern of imperial collapse is often the same. It is a multi-year process that begins with a massive debt explosion. For instance, in the 17th century, the Dutch Empire was the world's leading financial power. But the government gradually began spending beyond its means. By the late 18th century, their decline had begun, marked by excessive government spending, wealth inequality, and over-reliance on foreign goods. Today, the United States finds itself in the exact same position. Conversely, the rise of a new empire also follows a specific path: rapid economic growth, the establishment of factories, and an increase in exports. Today's China fits this description perfectly. Their strategy is simple: invest now, occupy later. While America spends 70% of its income on consumption, China spends only 39% and saves the rest. With these savings, they have built high-speed rail, green energy infrastructure, and modern chip factories. By the end of 2023, the total savings of the Chinese people reached a record $19.1 trillion. China is investing this capital not only domestically but globally through the Belt and Road Initiative. They have built ports, railways, and power plants in over 150 countries. China's investment in Africa, in particular, is staggering. In the last decade, they have built 12,000 kilometers of roads, 15 times more than USAID. While America has been involved in over 72 foreign conflicts in recent decades, such as the Iraq War, which cost $2.2 trillion, China has focused on expanding economic influence while avoiding war. The United States often seeks to impose democracy or its own political system on other countries, but China accepts these nations as they are and seeks cooperation. As a result, China's popularity in Africa surpasses that of the US in 2023. Meanwhile, a silent destruction is occurring inside America: deindustrialization. In 1960, 30% of jobs were in manufacturing. By 2020, that number dropped to just 8%. Steel towns like Pittsburgh or Youngstown, which once housed hundreds of factories, are now silent. America's industrial base is now largely hollowed out, resulting in the loss of good-paying opportunities for ordinary people. Although the U.S. economy has doubled since 1980, that wealth has not reached the masses. Today, the top 1% of Americans own more than 30% of the country's total wealth. Since 2000, the average income of low-income individuals has not increased at all, while house prices have risen by more than 500% over the last 40 years. This skyrocketing cost of living has left the general public frustrated. In 2024, Donald Trump secured a massive victory fueled by that resentment. His primary weapon was tariffs. He wanted to force companies to bring production back to America by taxing imported goods. However, only 10 days after announcing these plans, the administration was forced to back down slightly. In this era of free trade, sudden large tariffs make the bond market volatile. Even a slight increase in interest rates would pile hundreds of billions of dollars in additional burden onto a debt-ridden America. History bears witness, from Rome to Britain, that when great powers begin to lose their grip, they often try to maintain control through tariffs or desperate, knee-jerk decisions. But it rarely saves them. The current crisis in the United States is not the failure of a specific individual, rather, it is the fracturing of an old system. After decades of standing firm, the foundation of American dominance is now shaky. On one side is a nation burdened by debt, on the other is China, moving forward with long-term growth and stability. Is the era of American hegemony coming to an end? Looking at the current situation, it seems that Chinese dominance in the 21st century is not just possible, it is almost inevitable.